Hey everyone, Caleb Wojcik from DIY Video Guy here, and this is video number 3 with Phil Ebiner of VideoSchoolOnline, where we're talking After Effects. In the first video, he showed me how it's not that scary and you shouldn't run away in fear. And in the second video, he talked me through the tools and taught you guys how to actually do some keyframing and start doing movement on shapes and photos and text and stuff. But in this video, it's the third video in the series, we're going to actually recreate my lower third from scratch.
Yeah, I'm really excited because I think adding things like lower thirds can boost your video quality to the next level, to look professional. The lower third that you use looks really great, and it's just one kind of simple thing that if you have a YouTube channel, if you're creating videos for your business, just adding lower thirds makes it better. You can show your expertise with your name and your subtitle. I think it's really fun, and yeah, it's going to be fun to recreate yours.
Yeah, and I bought this one on, I think, Video Hive for, I don't know, I licensed it for $30 or $40 or something like that, but other people could go do that, and they could have the exact same looking one, except for maybe the font's different, maybe the colors are a little different. So being able to make your own from scratch completely differentiates your graphics from other people. So that's why I'd recommend learning the tools and making it yourself.
Totally, and just understanding how it works on the back end helps. And like you said, there's only a limited amount on Video Hive, especially when you look at like the most popular ones. So there are going to be other people with those graphics out there. So might as well create something on your own. And using the tools and the different effects we'll learn in this video, you'll be able to create all sorts of cool lower thirds and titles, not just lower thirds, but any sort of title.
Like stuff to put for your intro with like your logo or the outro or something, or just like when you have a little notification or something you want to pop up. I use these for just resetting someone's attention when they're watching my videos, or I have to put the text on screen because I'm saying like a Tascam DR100 Mark II and I want to have the text on screen. So lower thirds are really useful.
Yeah, so let's dive right back into After Effects. Here you can see Caleb's old lower third, or the one that he's currently using right now. So let me play through that. And you can see all sorts of different things going on. So I'll just go rewind a little bit. You can see all these different shapes coming on and off, and then it reverses the animation and goes out. And so I've recreated it to be a little bit more simple, but still classy, still clean, modern. So a little bit slower as well, but this is what we're going to be creating.
It's pretty much the same. The only difference is there's like some extra lines on theirs, and then like I changed the fonts a little bit, but it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do is start a new composition. So click this Create New Composition button. Again, if you haven't watched the previous videos in this series, they will really help you if you're new to After Effects. We're going to call this LT for lower third animation. 1920 by 1080, 2997, 5 seconds is the duration. So click OK. So that opens up our new animation, our new composition. So the first thing I do is I want to create the design of our final image. So we have this bar here with the text on the top with your name and then your subtitle. So I'm going to go ahead and create that bar. So I'm going to use my rectangle tool. I'm going to choose a fill of something like a dark medium gray. Keep the stroke at 0. One thing I can do is turn on my title action safe or a proportional grid just to kind of see some lines on my screen, just to kind of see maybe where I want to put it and help line things up. So I'm going to just click and drag and create this bar, something like that. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit further so I can see more of my lower third. I'm going to press space bar, which brings up my hand tool, which allows me to just move around my composition in my composition window.
Scrolling, you won't scroll up and down, you'll scroll in and out.
Exactly.
So you have to do that.
Yeah, scrolling zooms in and out, so I'll use the hand tool, which is pressing space bar and clicking. So again, if you accidentally scroll, sometimes that happens where you zoom in or zoom out. So I'm looking based off of here. So we have that gray bar. Now let's do the blue bar. So I'm just going to go back. I'm going to actually close a couple of these so that I don't need them. Close these tabs. So now let's create our blue bar for the lower subtitle. So I'm going to click my shape tool again, change the fill to something like this bluish gray, something like that. Make sure that you don't have this shape layer selected, because if you go ahead and have that selected and try to create a new bar, it's going to create a gray bar right here, similar to the other bar that's in that shape layer. So you see I clicked out of it, and now I'm going to create that second bar. So here what I can do, I can select both of these bars by either command clicking the next one or shift clicking the next one. And you can see that I have these different align properties. So if I align vertically, it will align centered. I want to align left because that's how yours is right now. Something like that. So let me zoom in again. So now let's add our text. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the proportional grid. I'm going to go take my text tool, and I'll just type in Caleb Wojcik. So that's a very funky text font right here, so we're going to change it to something more standard like Helvetica Neue. I don't know how you pronounce that, but Helvetica.
What do you say, Neue?
Neue,
I don't
okay.
think that's right, but
Who knows? Someone does. And then I'm going to change the size, just make it fit in this top bar. Something like this. Move it right there. A quick way to create another text layer is to just duplicate this text layer. And you can do that by selecting it in your timeline and pressing Command D if you're on a Mac, Control D if you're on a PC. And then you can move that second layer. And now I can double click in there. And what do I want to call you today?
probably DIY video guy.
DIY video guy. That's perfect. OK, so you can select that text again, and we can drop the size. So then I go back to my selection tool. I place it. Let me just see where I place it so it was left aligned. Something like that. And you can see that in our original one, the bar is a little bit longer, and the text is a little bit smaller. So I can just go ahead and edit these. So I can select my shape layer. I'm going to rename this so I know what I'm working with. I'll call this subtitle bar, and I'll call this top one title bar. And then I'll rearrange these layers to match. So I'll drag this DIY video guy text down to the bottom, and now the subtitle bar down to the bottom. So it's just layered in a better way for me to see. So let me just make this shape a little bit skinnier. I can do that by double clicking the edge and dragging in, something like that. I'm going to move it up just to squish it in there a little bit more. Take this text and shrink it a bit, and just place it in the right spot. Okay, so that is the basic design of our title. We're going to add this little bar in just a minute, but that comes a little bit later. So the first thing that happens in this composition is the text bar, or the background bar, grows on, and as it's growing on, your text appears as the bar is growing, right? So let's first animate that bar to grow on. So I'm going to take my title bar. I'm going to go ahead and take my pan behind tool to move the anchor point, which right now is up here in the center of the composition. I'm going to move it over here to the left side of my bar, right at the left edge. The reason is because now, if I want to animate the scale of this bar, it's going to animate from the left side, right?
Gotcha.
So to quickly get to the scale property of this title bar, I'm just going to hit S on my keyboard. That brings up scale. And you can see now if I scale it, it shrinks down that way, but I don't want it to shrink together. I don't want the vertical and the horizontal aspect of it to shrink. I want just the horizontal part to shrink. So I can unlock this constrain proportions button right here. And now if I just take that property, it shrinks down like that. So I'm going to keyframe it, right, to give it that little animation. So this is the end point, so I'm going to put my time indicator to 1 second. And now I'm going to set a keyframe for scale, saying at this point, I want it to look like this. And then I'm going to go back to 0 seconds and change this 100% to 0. So now the bar grows on. And let's just play through that to see how it looks. So that looks pretty good. Maybe it's a little slow, so I'm just going to take in this keyframe, drag it to the left a bit. Another thing I'll quickly do is add my Easy Ease. Right-clicking, choosing Keyframe Assistant and Easy Ease, or just hitting F9 on your keyboard. Okay, so now we have that bar growing, but we need your text to appear with that bar. Here's a quick tip, really a trick to be able to do that. What I'm going to do is duplicate this title bar by just Command-D'ing it, Command-D or Control-D on your keyboard. I'm going to move this title bar above your name. I'm going to call this Track Mat. And what I'm going to do is, you see this Track Mat column right here. And I'm going to set the Track Mat for your title to the Alpha Mat, which is, this is your Alpha Mat right here. Set it there, and now what that is saying is that wherever this bar appears, so does the layer beneath it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So now as this shrinks, your name disappears with that bar.
And you wouldn't just use the regular title bar. You had to duplicate it because you want that behind the text, right?
Yeah, if I just did the...
If you tracked it to the other one.
Yeah, it wouldn't work because, see, if I turn off this title bar, that's basically what it would have done.
Yeah.
It would just be like this,
right.
Which could be cool too, which could be a cool effect. But this is just an easy way to animate on some sort of text, or this could be a picture or anything, but based off of the animation of a shape layer.
Gotcha.
So we're going to quickly do that same idea for this other shape. So I'm just going to, again, move my pan behind, use the pan behind tool to move the anchor point down here to the right side of this bar because it grows from the right. What I can do now, I believe, is you see the scale keyframes. I can select both of these, copy them, Command-C, choose my subtitle bar. I'm just going to press S so I can see what's going on to bring up the scale. And if I paste it, now it's growing from the left. And it's at the same speed, same keyframe, easy ease. And that's nice because it just is
And it looks
easy.
like all it did was it shifted it a little bit.
Yeah, so I shifted it because I put my time indicator to the right a little bit, and that's when I pressed paste. If I pressed paste when it was over here on the left,
It would have been exactly the same. But you wanted it to kind of be delayed and come out a little bit later.
Exactly. So I'm going to do the same thing with the text where I duplicate this subtitle bar, call it Track Mat. I don't know really why I'd call it Track Mat, but you can call it Alpha Layer or whatever. Move it above your subtitle text, and then change the Track Mat of the DIY video guide text to Alpha Mat. So now we have your basic lower third animating on. So pretty cool already. The next thing we're going to do is add this bar that kind of, you can see it kind of shrink.
It looks like it's moving to reveal it. Kind of, yeah.
It's revealing it, and it's following the animation of the bar beneath it. So what we're going to do is use what we've already created to help us out. So let's start with the Caleb Wojcik title. And what I'm doing is I'm selecting all of these layers by pressing Command-A and then just pressing S to close them. So it's just a little bit cleaner. So I'm going to take my title bar, I'm going to duplicate it, and I'll just call it white accent. What I'm going to do is press U on my keyboard, which brings up my scale properties or any keyframes that I add to this layer. Pressing U will bring up those keyframes. I'm just going to delete these because I don't want these on here right now. I'm also going to go ahead and click my shape tool or the rectangle tool, which will allow me, when this shape is selected, to change the fill color to white. You with me?
Yep.
Now I'm going to take my selection tool. I'm going to squeeze in this white bar, so I'm going to just double click the edge and drag in. So first, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it as small as possible so you don't even see it. And then I'm going to bring open the keyframes of my title bar. So selecting title bar, pressing U. I'm going to take my time indicator back to 0. I'm going to zoom in here by pressing the plus or minus keys on my keyboard or clicking and dragging the zoom in bar up here. And I want this white bar to start at the left side when this title bar is animating on. So what I'm going to do with this white accent is drop down more properties. So when we open up our shape layers, you can see that there's the transform properties that we saw before, but there's also a whole set of contents properties. So under the contents properties, we have shape properties for rectangle. We have our rectangle path. We have our transform tools, which is the position of this shape, which is what we'll be animating. So I'm going to use this position to drag all the way to the left. And I might have to start one frame to the right so I can see where this bar starts. So drag all the way to the left, start it right about there. I'm going to set a position keyframe for it right there. I'm also going to set a scale keyframe right there. And you can see that it's 0.1 right now. I'm going to change that to 0. So it's completely off my screen. And then when I see let me find my other ending keyframe. I'm going to bring it all the way to that next keyframe. And I'm going to move my white bar to that end spot. So I'm going to drag this all the way to the right. And I might have to make it a little bit bigger so that I can see what it looks like. Let's do it like so. So I had actually accidentally changed both of the height and the width of this to 0. I just want the width to be 0, so this height is at 100. Let me just change this to something like 1 or 2. So now if I zoom in here, I want this to be at the very edge of the end of the animation bar. And I'm going to set this to 0. So right now, if I zoom out, I'm zooming out by using this magnification tool up here. And I get to that with the keyboard shortcut Z. And you can zoom in or zoom out by pressing the Option key when you have that tool selected. So now what I have is really nothing going on right now. I just have this invisible shape moving from the left to the right. In the middle, I want it to get thicker, though. So I want it to start at 0, but in the middle, I want it to really be a thick bar. So at this left part, I want the height to be 100. So again, this should be at 100. The width should be at 0. In the middle, I want the width to be something like 10%. So now we're starting to see some sort of animation. The first thing I'm going to do is move these two first keyframes to the left. And then I'm going to easy ease all of these.
Yeah, I can tell they're a little bit off right now.
So what's happening is...
Because one's at a constant speed and one's easing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening. So I'm going to easy ease them, select all of them, easy ease. So now you can see it slows and it follows that bar.
Up. Yeah.
The one thing I want to make sure is that this white accent is above our actual text. And I don't want it to be right directly above the Caleb text because that will then become the alpha mat for this Caleb text.
So it's got to be above both of them.
So it's got to be above both of them. So now you have that animation. Looking pretty cool?
Yeah. So now we do it on the bottom.
So now we do it on the bottom. So I'll quickly run through that bottom. So what we did was we just duplicated this bottom bar. So let's bring up the keyframes for that. Press U. I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to call white accent. I'm going to press U to bring up the keyframes for the scale. I'm going to delete them. I'm going to use my shape tool up here to change to white. And then what I'm going to do is zoom in with my zoom tool, which is Z on your keyboard again. Move it around just so I can see it. So at the end, I'm just going to shrink this down a bit with the selection tool. Double click the ends, shrink down to about 0, and then drop down our shape properties. So recollapse that, open up our contents, rectangle contents, transform properties, And our scale and position, we're going to set keyframes to and move to our final position. So drag this to the left. So we want it to be dragged to the left and also at 0. So set that to 0. And then we're going to go to the beginning of this animation, which we can see by going to this keyframe, moving our time indicator there, and moving our position to the right. And again, we kind of have to see it again, so let's make it, I did the same thing again. This should be 100%, so you have to make sure that you unlock those constrain proportion properties. So make sure that the height is at 100%. And now we put this at the start, which if we move over to the start, we should be able to see where it starts. And we might not be able to see where it starts right at the beginning, so we have to
bump the keyframe
over so we can see them, see where it starts, something like right there. Go back to where our keyframe actually starts, bump these keyframes that we just created. Now we have the same problem where we don't see it actually, so we have to change the scale in the middle to 10% width. And our height is a little bit too much, so we'll fix that later, but then we'll just ease these.
Okay.
So you can see the height is different, and I think that's because I changed the shape after I created it in the beginning. So to quickly change that, I can just select all of my scale properties, and I'll go to the center one where I can see it and shrink this down to where it matches your bar. So maybe like 75%. Something like that. So now it should start. So again, this changed everything, so we should change this to 0. Now the first keyframe and our last keyframe, we should set this to 0. So it goes from 0 width and follows our shape. Again, we're going to move this on top of our text and our track mat. And now we have the basic first part of our shape animation. So now that we have our animated lower third, what we're going to do is quickly reverse this animation and bring it into Adobe Premiere Pro. So let's get back into After Effects. And to reverse this animation, what I'm going to do is pre-compose these layers. What that means is putting all of these into another composition that I can then reverse. So what I do is select all of these layers by selecting the top one, holding down Shift and selecting the last one, right-clicking, and choosing Pre-Compose. I'm going to rename this lower third work, whatever you want to call it. And now all those layers were transferred into this one composition. So now it's one layer. If I double-click this, it will open up the actual work area that we were using to create this animation. So to quickly reverse this, what I'm going to do is we have our sequence is about 5 seconds. I'm going to cut this first layer down to about 2.5 seconds, so about half the length of our composition. So I'm just going to drag this right side in to about 2.5 seconds. I'm going to duplicate this lower third's pre-composition, so I can do that by pressing Command D. So now I have two on top of each other. I'm going to take this top one and drag it over to the right so that it's right at the end of this first one, so it butts up against it. And I'm going to reverse the second one. Hopefully this is making sense why I'm doing this. So I'm going to right-click, go to Time, and Time Reverse Layer. So now the second layer on top is reversed. So it goes from your animated intro on, and then it's animated off. And we see there it is, you can't see the end of the composition because it doesn't let us play through the very last second. So let's just scooch this over to the left a little bit and make sure that there is no overlapping, like so. Now it animates off. And so when we animate it on and off, we won't be able to see that. So let's go ahead and bring this into Adobe Premiere Pro now. So there's a couple ways to do that. The quickest and easiest way is using Adobe Dynamic Link, which links two different Adobe products and allows you to work with them together. What I can do is take this composition, that lower third animation, I'm clicking it And while I'm clicking and holding, I'm going to tab over to Adobe Premiere Pro. And I could drop it into my project bin right within Adobe Premiere Pro. And now if I have a project, I can just drag this down onto my timeline. And this lower third now is able to be played on top of a video. It's got the full animation, the reverse, the first part, and then the reverse out.
And the big benefit of using dynamic link is you could go back to Premiere right now, make a change. You could change my name if there's a typo in it, then it would automatically update in Premiere.
Exactly.
As opposed to rendering it from After Effects, bringing it in. So I know some people will edit in Final Cut Pro 10 and then they'll use After Effects, but there is none of this dynamic updating of things really easily.
Exactly, and I do want to show you how to export from After Effects so that if people do want to actually export this lower third file and have it as a file that they take or send to people, let's do that first too. So with your main composition, what we're going to do is go up to Composition, Add to Render Queue. So this is our render queue where we're going to actually export things. You see here that I have a few other projects that I've exported before. I'm going to go ahead and just delete those. So we have a bunch of them. So we have our one that we're working with right now. So this is what you should see when you render for the first time. You want to click on this lossless text right here. And this is where it's important because you want to make sure that it exports with a transparent background. If you don't do this, you'll have a black background. So you want to change this channels from RGB to RGB plus alpha. Under format, you want to make sure that it's on animation and the quality around 100, just for maximum quality. Click OK. Then where this says output to and it says not yet specified, we can just choose where we want to and we'll just put it on the desktop for now. We'll save it and then we click this render button. And depending on how fast your computer is, how intricate the animation is, that's how you would export. And now if we go to our Finder, we open up our desktop, we have this lower third animation. And you can take this into Adobe Premiere Pro and it will have the transparent background right there and you can use it.
Yeah, before I knew about dynamic linking, that's what I did. I would pre-render all the thirds and I would bring them in, and sometimes we still do that for the one of my name that I use all the time. Instead of like having to pull the After Effects composition all the time, I'll just use something like that.
Yeah. So that is pretty much it for our lower third.
So we've made it from scratch. You guys didn't know how to use After Effects when you first started watching this series. We've taught you some of the tools, made it less scary, you made a lower third, and now you can bring it into Premiere and use it. So I would highly recommend that you go and check out Phil's channel. He has a lot of stuff at Video School Online on YouTube, as well as on his website with After Effects tutorials and other video courses on making videos as well. So thanks for joining me, Phil.
Yeah, Caleb, thanks so much for having me, and I look forward to collaborating in the future.
Cool.